happy day, everybody. Thank you for joining me. My name is Melvin, and this is The Fire You Can't Put Out, episode number 53. We are taping today on Saturday, January 25th, celebrating more than a year on the mic, making angry out of the right. All right. Another heavy news week. But I want to start with West Virginia. In West Virginia, their water is still not drinkable. For a while there, they were saying it's okay, you can take your chances with it. And then they said, well, you know what, go ahead and drink it. And then 4 days later, they said, well, don't drink it if you're pregnant, though. But pregnant women had already been drinking the water. What was found in the water, obviously, was a chemical that you're not supposed to consume, and it had leaked for several days before they let anybody know about it. The chemical, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it because it's got about 5 syllables in it, but what the chemical is it's used for cleaning coal. So, what happens now? West Virginians still can't drink their water a couple of weeks out. The governor says, go ahead and take your chances. So what of Freedom Industries? Yeah, that's actually the name of the company. Freedom Industries has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy this week. Yep. So they've said, you know what? The cost of cleaning that up, yeah, we can't do that. So here's the thing. For years and years, they fought for low taxes, less regulation, and all the rest, and they got all that stuff, right? So they got to use the public commons. They got to dirty up West Virginia's water, and now they paid almost nothing for it. Okay, now they're going to file Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and they say, hey, everybody, guess what else you get to pay for? You get to pay for the cleanup. That's the Libertarian Society. Now, a couple of things about Freedom Industries. They were founded by an individual named Carl Lemley Kennedy II. As the Charleston Gazette has reported, Kennedy filed for personal bankruptcy in 2005 after he was hit with federal charges of tax evasion and failure to remit employee withholding taxes. He is also reported to have admitted to diverting more than $1 million that should have gone to the IRS. Another remarkable aspect of this story, reported by the Gazette, is that Freedom Industries was struggling in 2009, and its Elk River facility was able to go on functioning only after the Army Corps of Engineers dredged the portion of the river using federal stimulus funds. So they got tons of taxpayer help. They got propped up by taxpayers, and they will ultimately rely on the taxpayers to clean up their mess. That's freedom, America, liberty, and all the rest. So what does the rest of the country think about this? Most of the country right now is talking about what's going on with Chris Christie. Rachel Maddow has absolutely been on this Christie story. I never miss an episode of her show, but I'm considering doing so perhaps for the next week. She's on this every day. She's tried peppering in other stories to her show, but the Christie thing is every day, and I get it to a degree. Because she was the first person to break the story nationally. It was initially broken by local reporters there in New Jersey, and then she reported on it on her show. And then when the story really broke, it was really it had to do a lot with her reporting. So she's pretty proud of it, and good for her. Otherwise, people might not know about what Chris Christie did. And of course, Chris Christie is in a heap of trouble right now, and it looks like the word to shut down the George Washington Bridge definitely came out of his office. Chris Christie is the head of the Republican Governors Association, and Ken Cuccinelli came out this week. He's the first Republican to come out and say, Chris Christie, you should step down as the Republican Governors Association head. That you should, because even whether the charges are true or not, perception is reality. So by reporting this story, Rachel has done a fabulous job of taking down one of their top candidates. Elected back in 2009, which was an off-year election, was Chris Christie and Governor Bob McDonnell. Governor Bob McDonnell has now been brought up on charges, He got to finish out his term in Virginia, but he had to leave the office in shame. But he's now been brought up on charges. Him and his lovely wife, they both have separate legal teams. And if any of the charges stick, they're looking at a couple of decades in prison. Chris Christie, the other person who was elected that year, same deal. Well, not same, but he's in a heap of trouble too. He's being asked to step down from a leadership position, and he is no longer a viable candidate for 2016. It feels weird to talk about 2016, I know, but it's very much out there. So her reporting has helped take him down. So I get it, but I'm a lot sick of the Christie story. I'm done with the Christie story. So when asked about West Virginia, the water in West Virginia, say, with what's happened in West Virginia, how many more Americans want regulation, want more regulation? Okay, so. Half of Americans favor tightening regulations in order to protect public water supplies and on companies that use and store chemicals, according to a new HuffPo YouGov poll. Now, HuffPo, YouGov, they work together all the time to do these polls. 51% of Americans in the poll said the government should do more to regulate companies that use, manufacture, and store chemicals, while 30% said current regulations on these companies are about right, and 7% said the government should do less. There are actually people, I'm surprised about two things that have to do with this poll. First of all, the fact that it's only half. They can't drink their water. We still see unregulated companies as saviors of the economy. That blows my mind. And the fact that there's actually 7 people that said, you know what, the government does too much to regulate. Yeah, I know they spilled a bunch of crap in the water supply. People can't drink it. Ladies who are pregnant who drink the water, their babies may not have birth defects. But you know what, the government should definitely do less. New regulations, let's see. And 50% said the government should do more to regulate the safety of public water supply, compared to 34% who said current regulations are about right and 5% who wanted less regulation. New regulations in each case were favored by big majorities of Democrats and nearly half of independents. Republicans, though, were more likely to say that they don't want more regulations. The survey finds a lot of evidence that most people weren't even paying attention. Most people, 31%, were paying attention to the Chris Christie deal, the thing we just talked about, and the 31% said they were paying attention to the chemical spill, 29% said that they were paying attention to Chris Christie, and 34% said that they hadn't been paying attention to either story. I suppose you can't make people care. You can't make people naturally curious. That's what it is. It's why we call it natural curiosity. And they don't seem to have it. So let's look at the Republicans, first of all, who want less regulation, especially when compared to Democrats, and why they think that. So often, over on conservative media by and large, it is espoused that most of the major media is run by liberals. Well, with most of major media being owned by corporations, I can tell you that it is actually quite the opposite. But you don't hear that. The drum that's being beaten right now is that the whole media is liberal. Okay, fine. This show is liberal. And I do news on this show, but I am a commentator. And I make no bones about that. There are, however, a lot of news outlets masquerading, well, they're masquerading as news outlets, but they're really just espousing pre-approved Republican talking points. Steve Bannon, over at MSNBC, went over all the politicals that were on the Sunday shows. The Sunday shows are, if any of you watch them, I do and I don't sometimes. I really don't care for them. I used to love when Tim Russert was doing, he was doing Meet the Press. But, I mean, since he's been gone, the guy that's in there now, I don't particularly care for him at all. So he went over the whole year, all the people that have been on the Sunday shows. And the Sunday shows they sort of start the political week. They start the conversation that kicks off over the next week. I mean, it generally starts on the Sunday shows. So he tallied all the appearances on Meet the Press, Face the Nation, This Week, State of the Union, and Fox News Sunday, and concluded that Sunday shows love Republicans. 10 of the top 13 guests are Republicans, and 6 of the top 7 are Republicans. I'm looking at, there were three Democrats, Manchin, Schumer, and Durbin, and then the rest of them they're all conservatives. So this was the case when Bush was in office too. So what they'd always say, the Sunday shows especially, they'd always say, well, the Republicans are in charge right now. Everyone wants to know what they think, so that's why we're interviewing more Republicans. Well, now that we have a Democratic president, now they're saying, well, we gotta listen to the opposition. You see how that the reasoning just slides there? You can look at this over at MSNBC. Just punch in Steve Bannon, 2013 Sunday shows. A couple of other things that we learned from it, though. There is one woman on the list, and her name is Kelly Ayotte, and she's a Republican from New Hampshire. And she famously voted against enforcement of equal pay laws for women because it would, quote, place a lot of additional burdens on job creators. There are no men or women of color on this list. The average age of the men who top the list is nearly 66. However, though, if you take out Mike Rogers, who is 50, the equation changes and the average age goes up to 69. And of course, Newt Gingrich made over 20 appearances, and he hasn't been in public office since 1999. So much for the liberal media. There's an alternative media out there, but the major media and most of your nightly news and all of those that the big network shows that everybody sees every night, the shows that are put out nationally, the news shows, and you can see it, they work really, really hard to not appear to be liberal. So simply calling all of the news outlets liberal is something that is referred to as working the refs. They're not liberal, they are simply giving the news, but the news wasn't favorable to conservatives, so conservatives screamed bias. And now, they don't give us the news. There is somebody who's working very, very hard for our side right now. And I think essentially that our side is the side of all people, at the very least, most people. There was a congressional panel this week held on January 16th, and it was Bernie Sanders who was presiding over it. Now, Sanders is an independent, and he pointed out during the panel the panel was on income inequality, that more Americans are currently living in poverty than at any point in the nation's history, as the top 1% siphoned off 95% of all income generated between 2009 and 2012. I've made this claim on the show before, but I didn't have a story to back it up, and I said I would come back with this. So, quote, does anyone on that panel think that it makes moral sense or economic sense, Sanders asked. Does anyone think that it makes moral or economic sense that one family, the Walton family, who owns Walmart, own more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people, unquote. Another quote, the Walton family is the wealthiest family in America. Does anybody on the panel think that they need significant welfare help? And yet it turns out they are the largest recipient of Walmart in America. That's something you won't hear about on the Sunday talk shows. By the way, one more note on the Sunday talk shows. The West Virginia water thing, when that broke, it really should have been the lead, or at least somewhere in the discussion on the Sunday news shows, and it wasn't. There was a complete blackout on it. Liberal media, my derriere. Okay? Alright. He also accused the retailer, back to the article about Walmart, of paying its employees starvation wages, which in turn forced working families into taxpayer-funded social welfare programs to help pay for their medical care, food, and housing. The first panelist, this is our first winner, okay, Scott Winsnip of the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research said, quote, I would not use the word welfare, I think it's stigmatizing. Adding that Walmart offered low prices to its customers, but he was then countered by another panelist, former Labor Secretary Robert Reich, who said he did not think that the taxpayer should subsidize any corporation that failed to pay its workers enough to survive. Reich added that Walmart, the nation's largest private employer, paid its workers an average of $8.80 an hour. By comparison, he said, the nation's largest employer in 1955 was General Motors, which paid workers an average of $37 an hour. That's in today's money. So when it's welfare for the wealthy, giving more to the wealthy, that's okay. But if it is food stamps or housing help or medical care, it's going to poor people. It has to be cut. We can't afford it. We can't afford it. So they say. Eventually, this is all going to come to a head. Yesterday, the stock market dropped by over, just around 350 points, I believe. It's a pretty big drop for a day. And those were the kind of drops that we started seeing prior to the 2008 crash. I believe the largest crash that happened before it was 900 plus points. All of this is eventually going to come to a head because so much money is at the top. One of the things that they mentioned when they were talking about the stock market yesterday was they said that with all of the recovery in the economy and people working, it didn't seem that people were buying a lot of goods and services. Well, if all of your money is at the top and not at the bottom where they tend to spend all or most of their money, seems to me your job creators are in the working class. They're not the guys they're not the billionaires at the top with the mansions and all the rest. Your job creators are folks like you and me, people who spend our money. I'm created a job right now. I got 2 guys working on my roof at the moment. I'm a job creator. So I spend my money and give a billionaire a tax break. He doesn't run out and spend those billions. He socks them away. He puts them offshore, whatever else. So all this will eventually come to a head. And the corporations are fighting harder than ever. They still don't think that they have enough money. What happens is they said, well, it's trickle-down economics. Once our cup is full, whatever runneth over goes to you, the little people. But the problem with that cup is it keeps growing. Every time it's almost full, it grows again and again and again. And they're not happy. So there was an image of a person holding a cardboard sign reading, "I don't need a raise, I need a job." Okay? And it was part of a full-page ad produced by the Employment Policies Institute, EPI, remember that appeared in the New York Times last Tuesday. In addition to the photo, the ad condemns the push from congressional Democrats and President Obama to raise the federal minimum wage to $10.10 an hour by 2016 and index it to inflation going forward, so that way it continually goes up. Keeps up with COLA, okay? Cost of living adjustment. The ad cites, quote unquote, most studies as showing that minimum wage hike doesn't actually help poor people, and then claims the best weapon in the war on poverty is a job. What the ad is actually trying to do is pit the unemployed against minimum wage workers seeking a living wage. This comes to us from Daily Kos, a writer over there by the name of Ian Ruffowitz, okay? So, where exactly, quoting from the article, so where exactly did the ad, the one whose claims directly contradict the findings of economists, come from? The ad came from EPI. Now follow me, okay? This acronym, okay? The ad came from the Employment Policies Institute, founded in 1991, while the economist statement in support of raising the minimum wage came from the Economic Policy Institute, founded in 1986. Okay, but they named themselves something that they could use the acronym EPI so as to confuse you with the other think tank that found that raising the minimum wage will definitely help. So, who is the Employment Policies Institute, and why might they have chosen a name that echoes an already existing think tank? To confuse you, okay? The Employment Policies Institute is a shill, a front group for the restaurant industry and other corporate right-wing interests, as documented by the Center for Media and Democracy's SourceWatch. The Employment Policies Institute operates from the same office as Berman & Co., a public relations firm owned by Richard Berman, who was once featured or profiled in a 60 Minutes piece called Dr. Evil. That's for real. That's not a joke. Recently, it has been working to show that restaurant workers don't need higher wages or paid sick days. Berman's Employment Policies Institute took out a full-page ad attacking Acorn also. Yes, not recently, but this is what they do over there, okay? The anti-minimum wage ad is part of a larger push by corporations spearheaded by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So Berman and Company puts together their own EPI and then gets this ad out there and says, these people don't need more money. They don't need a living wage. All they need is a job. Well, actually, we need both. Because there's no reason that a person should be working full-time and not be able to support themselves and not be able to survive. I know I'm repeating myself here, but they're working to protect their billions. They don't need them. They don't need that much money. I'd say it's akin to hoarding. Okay? Now, but they're not all on the same page with respect to that, okay? There is one gentleman his name is Ron Unz, okay? He's a Silicon Valley multimillionaire and a registered Republican who once ran for governor and briefly U.S. Senate. And he wants state voters to endorse the wage jump that he predicts would nourish the economy and lift low-paid workers from dependency on food stamps and other things bankrolled by taxpayers, okay? Unz is the former publisher of the American Conservative magazine. 2 decades ago, as a 32-year-old, the theoretical physicist turned software developer, tried to unseat then Governor Pete Wilson, another Republican. Okay, Unz says taxpayers for too long have been subsidizing low-wage businesses since the government pays for food stamps and other programs those workers often need to get by. He posits that the increase at $12 an hour, up from the current $8, would lift millions of Californians out of poverty, drive up the income and sales tax revenue, and save taxpayer billions of dollars since those workers would no longer qualify for many welfare benefits. He dismissed the notion that countless jobs would just evaporate, okay, noting that the state's lower wage jobs are in agriculture and the service sector, which can't be easily automated or transported elsewhere. He believes that higher wages would make the jobs more attractive to U.S. residents, curtailing a lure for illegal immigration. And I tend to think that he's right. So where is our president on all of this? The president said on January 14th, so, not this past Tuesday, but the Tuesday before that, he was praising the Congress for passing the $1 trillion spending bill. Okay, we'll get to the spending bill in just a minute. Okay, which funds the government through the end of the fiscal year. Okay, which is in September. Obama then he said, okay, fine, you passed the bill, great, good job, but you need to act on these other priorities that we have as well, including an extension of jobless insurance for the long-term unemployed and comprehensive immigration reform. Okay, quote: We're not just gonna wait for the legislation. Obama said, "I've got a pen and a phone, and I can use that pen to sign executive orders and take executive action and administrative action that will move that bill forward." Now that's all great and good. He's threatening. He's making it sound like a credible threat, like he can actually do something alone. And this once again goes back to something that I cover a lot on this show. Most people don't know what the president does. In order to get unemployment and all the rest of these things, as much as conservatives love to call him a dictator, he's not. And he couldn't be, even if he wanted to be. He has to wait for Congress to send him this legislation. He can claim a lot of executive orders. And he's using strong language. He says these people need, these benefits. We need these things to keep the economy rolling along. But honestly, he can't do it without Congress, and that's by design. Okay? Alright, so, the $1 trillion spending bill, okay? The Senate voted 72-26 for the measure, and Obama has signed it, okay? It pays for the implementation of Obamacare, okay? Which, of course, you may remember, caused a government shutdown because the Tea Party did not want it, dang gummit. So they shut down the government for 16 days back in October. Also included is funding for tighter regulations on financial markets, but not at the levels that the president wanted. All 53 Democrats, 2 independents, and 17 Republicans voted for the bill. Of course, the 26 against it were all Republicans. The bill increases spending by about $26 billion over the fiscal 2013, with most of the increase going to domestic programs. Almost $9 billion in, listen here, unrequested money for overseas military and diplomatic operations helps ease shortfalls in the Pentagon and foreign aid budgets. Now, $9 billion in unrequested money. If you're the Pentagon, you're getting money in America. I'm working on another story right now that I hope to bring you, if not next week, the week after. But it talks about the story is going to talk about, and I'm trying to piece it together myself. Of course, I'll cite sources and all the rest. But it talks about how massive we already know that more than half the money that we spend and half the money that we send to Washington, D.C. goes to the military, which then gets put into a bomb, which then gets dropped on someone overseas, or it goes into this massive military spying program that we have. I don't know if people realize this, and like I said, I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds on this right now, but there are over 2,000 different companies spying on Americans right now. 2,000. And most of those people working for those agencies are making six figures. So, once again, we'll get into that next week. But that's where all of your money is going. Okay? Okay, so back to this. The Environmental Protection Agency is also barred from issuing rules on methane emissions from livestock operations. So, yes, the Republicans did slip some deregulation into it. So that's to be expected. Otherwise, they wouldn't have voted for it. Another provision exempts disabled veterans and surviving military spouses from a pension cut that was enacted last month. Here's the other thing. $200 million was cut off from embassy security. But wait! Benghazi! Right? Like they're all freaked out. Benghazi! 4 people died! Right? But it was Boehner who pushed for the cut. Because, well, as he likes to say, we just cut, right? Just cut this and cut that and cut everything, right? But then there's a problem because Benghazi! Right? Everyone's freaking Benghazi! Okay, so what are we going to do about Benghazi? For the last 4 years since Benghazi happened, they've cut embassy security all 4 years. It's a fake story. Even they don't care. Yeah, they're pushing it and they're screaming their guts out about it. But when these embassy attacks happened when Bush was president and over 60 people died and over 10 different attacks, they didn't care. I was very happy to see that Tom Hartman finally covered that this week on his show because, yeah, it's been an open secret for a while that the way they handled Benghazi is certainly not the way that they handled the attacks in India, Pakistan, Peru, Uzbekistan, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Istanbul, all of those attacks happening during the Bush administration, okay? Now, election year stuff, I'm going to get into this just a touch, and as we get closer and closer to the election, we'll get more and more into that stuff, okay? But this is good news. A judge in Pennsylvania struck down the state's voter identification law. According to the ruling from the Commonwealth Court Judge Bernard McGinley, the requirement to present an acceptable form of identification when voting in person, quote, unreasonably burdens the right to vote. Okay? In his ruling, pardon me, Judge McGinley wrote that the law poses a substantial threat to hundreds of thousands of disqualified voters. Quote, voting laws are designed to assure a free and fair election. The voter ID law does not further this goal. Okay? In his ruling, which you can find a PDF for over at dailycoast.com, McGinley noted that the law is too burdensome on the hundreds of thousands of voters affected, particularly students and the elderly. One of the things the judge pointed out was where people would have to go to get this ID is a place where buses and all the rest don't go out to, and a lot of poor people wouldn't be able to get there, okay? Among his other findings, of course, was there was no compelling interest behind the law because in-person voting fraud isn't a real problem. So, for the tens of thousands of people in any county that turn out to vote, maybe 3 or 4 or it's always a single digit. Like that's how many people they'll find out voted fraudulently. It's always in a single. Sometimes it's in the double digits, but when the voting fraud rate is 0.00001, you can't make everybody get an ID because it's pretty clear what you're trying to do. Your leverage in the election goes up when the voting populace goes down. Okay? That's what the conservatives believe. Another interesting thing that's going on over in California is the gentleman who has decided to run for governor. So, what are his attributes? We're talking about Tim Donnelly, the California Assemblyman. What would he do for California if he became your governor? Okay? He put out a 3.5-minute ad. Just punch in Tim Donnelly, governor, ad. Watch it. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life, okay? He talks about how big... No. He hints at how big his testicles are. This is the guy you want, right? His wife kind of does it. And he wants to put a gun in every Californian's gun safe, okay? He is married to Maria Conchita Alonso, and she's standing next to him the whole time, only speaking in Spanish. At one point, the ad degenerates into a discussion of whether Donnelly's wife or Alonso is more sexually attractive. This isn't a joke, okay? Donnelly also wants voters to know that he's very angry. I'm very angry. He keeps saying he's a teabagger. He's very angry. And he keeps saying that in the ad. And he thinks that McDonald's restaurants in his state should pay $20 per hour because, quote unquote, we're Californians. Now, raising the wages of working people isn't a typical teabagger thing, but okay, good for him. He's pushing it. Donnelly's ad is likely an attempt, though, because, like I said, his wife appears in the ad next to him, but she only speaks in Spanish. He says something, she says something in Spanish. He says something, she says something in Spanish. So the ad is likely an appeal to Latino voters, but that's going to be an uphill climb for him. Why? Because Donnelly is the founder of the Minuteman movement in California, a group of anti-immigrant vigilantes. That will come out during the race. Donnelly was featured on the Colbert Report proclaiming that, quote, it is a great day to be a vigilante. He then discusses how he considered hiring illegal aliens to build a border fence at the California-Mexico border. You know what? You should give, if you're listening in California, you should give some money to Donnelly. Not a lot, just some. Just keep this guy in the race. Holy wow, this is going to be hilarious. Okay? Another weird Republic. I'm just bringing you some news of the weird now. There's a book coming out, okay? Gabriel Sherman's new biography about Fox News President Roger Ailes is... The New York Times got some details about some stuff that's in the book, okay? This comes to us from Gabriel Bluestone over at Gawker. The book details Ailes' efforts to influence national politics at one point in 2012, telling Fox News executives, quote, I want to elect the next president. Wait a minute. Fox was a straight-up news organization. Oh, come on. No, he did not say that. Yes, he did. Okay, according to the book, Ailes took great efforts to promote Mitt Romney in the 2012 election and even before his nomination, advised Paul Ryan to get a speech coach for future TV appearances. Okay, a couple of revelations from the book. During a salary negotiation in the 1980s, Ailes offered producer Randy Harrison, Randy spelled with an I, so it's fairly certain it's a lady, an additional $100 a week if she would agree to have sex with him whenever he wanted. My. He is gross. He also privately thinks of Bill O'Reilly as, quote, a book salesman with a TV show. During a 1990s power struggle with NBC executive David Zaslav, Ailes is accused of making an anti-Semitic remark involving an obscenity and using the words little and Jew. NBC's chairman and counsel believe, quote-unquote, he probably said it. Fox News, of course, has issued a statement and said that these charges are false. The fact department over there at Fox News has fact-checked it, and it's false. And so when Fox News says it's false, well, that means it's so unbelievably true. So with the election happening this year, the midterm election. The Republican candidates who want to run are, they're starting to put their names out there, and of course, as is usual, they're also they're going to spend this election year trying to define what rape is. I don't know why conservatives are so just out of their minds. They have to redefine rape. And I was thinking, why do they so badly keep working to redefine rape? Well, in the abortion debate, it's quite often said that, well, we want to make abortion illegal. Some of them will say in all cases, and then some will say except in cases of rape and incest. Okay, incest is pretty clear. Okay. But rape, if they redefine rape, then they can reduce even further the number of people who get abortions. Okay, now, here we go. I'm just gonna give this to you, okay? This comes to us from David Edwards over at Raw Story. You may remember that all the national offices in Virginia went to Democrats this year, okay? So, the Virginia GOP are pushing a congressman, a moderate congressman, okay? On Wednesday, Mother Jones pointed out that Senator Richard H. Dick Black, who is running to take over retiring Representative Frank Wolf's seat, had fought against making spousal rape a crime because the woman was, quote, sleeping in the same bed and she's wearing a nightie. Hey, it's not rape if it's her husband and she was laying next to him and she was wearing a nightie. All right. Quote, I do not know how you could validly get a conviction of a husband-wife rape when they're living together and sleeping in the same bed and she's wearing a nightie and so forth, Black says. There's not injuries, there's no separation or anything. In 2001, Black asserted that emergency contraception was, quote-unquote, baby pesticide, and he recently compared the Supreme Court ruling that legalized abortion to, wait for it, the Holocaust. Okay, so Dick Black said in a speech on the 2013 anniversary of the Roe v. Wade ruling that, quote, I recall back to the days in Nazi Germany, there was a place called Auschwitz. We look back on history, we say, why didn't the Germans do something? Why didn't they rise up? Why didn't they take action? He continued, but they were helpless before their government, just as we are helpless before our government. Oh my goodness, this is for real. So, Dick Black, crazy old Dick Black, actually dropped out of the race on Thursday, January 23rd. But hey, it's an election year. He's not the first, and he won't be the last to try to redefine rape this year. So stay tuned. They will be covered here on TFYCPO. So let's get to Classy Cuccinelli, who is no longer the top law representative in Virginia anymore because he was beaten. Okay, but just hours before leaving the office, former Virginia Attorney General Ken Cuccinelli issued an opinion. Okay, while he could still speak as the state's top legal officer. Cuccinelli's non-binding opinion, which is dated January 10th, 2014, concludes that, quote, a governor may not direct or require any agency of state government to allow same-sex couples to receive joint marital status for Virginia income tax returns. Cuccinelli's successor, Democrat Mark Herring, was sworn in on January 11th. So he wanted to just put out this nice anti-gay statement before he was no longer the Attorney General anymore. So it was an official statement, but it was non-binding, okay? Because, the United States Constitution forbids Virginia from denying, quote, denying to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection under the laws, unquote, and that at least one federal judge has held that states cannot deny marriage equality to same-sex couples under the 14th Amendment. Governor McAuliffe, who is the new governor, okay, signed, he campaigned on a pro-gay rights platform. His first his first action as governor was an executive order shielding LGBT state employees from employment discrimination. I want to say something real quick about Virginia. There's a thing that goes way back. It's called the Virginia Way. So the governor that just got indicted on federal charges for bribery and all the rest, Bob McDonnell. He was the first governor in Virginia to ever have that happen. There's a thing called the Virginia Way, and there's not a lot of strong laws against taking bribes in Virginia. Actually, I don't think there's any. These charges that Bob McDonnell's being brought up on are federal charges, taking money and gifts and all the rest. Okay, so one of the other things that the new governor, Terry McAuliffe, did was to make it illegal to take any gift that exceeds $100. So almost we're not going to be taking bribes, and almost a smack in the face to old Bob McDonnell. So because Bob McDonnell didn't break any state laws and he only broke federal laws, and he's got a whole thing against the federal government anyway, he's trying to say, and he's right, we did not break any laws in Virginia. He's right. There's not a law in Virginia against taking bribes. But let's just take this on its face. What the hell is wrong with you? You know you shouldn't be taking bribes in exchange for favors. What the... Okay, who cares if there's laws or not? There's obviously federal law, so Bob McDonnell will be brought up on those charges. But even with that, what's wrong with you, Bob? You shouldn't be taking those things. So anyway, he's fighting for his life right now. Okay. So back to where we were before. Yikes. HR 7. Remember HR 7. We're going to be paying attention to this to see what happens to it. Okay. House Republicans are currently advancing what they're calling the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion Act, or HR 7. By the way, because of the Hyde Amendment, it's already illegal for taxpayers to fund abortions. It's already out. But it doesn't matter. ACORN's been defunct for years now, and every single year, and including the most recent spending bill that was passed by Congress, there was a line in it about defunding ACORN. ACORN's been gone for years. It doesn't matter. These guys, they fight fake fights. It's really what it is, okay? In addition... This comes to us from Think Progress. In addition to preventing low-income women from using their Medicaid coverage to access abortion, one of its most controversial provisions would actually require the IRS to conduct audits of rape victims. Okay? Here's why. HR 7 eliminates medical expense deductions for abortion care, essentially raising taxes on the women who opt to have an abortion. Like many abortion restrictions, this provision includes an exemption for victims of rape and incest, as well as women who encounter life-threatening complications from their pregnancies. But in order to enforce these exceptions, the IRS would have to verify that the women who are claiming medical expense deduction for an abortion fall into one of those three categories to ensure that they are not committing tax fraud. Essentially, that would empower the government agency to have the final say over what counts as sexual assault or a life-threatening situation, and that in turn would force victims to prove their case. Okay, if you claim it on your taxes and you get audited, and I've heard, it's not happened to me, knock on wood, audits are painful. You have to prove everything that you claim, okay? And so what this bill would do was, if they're going to claim this as a medical expense, and it is, then they would have to prove that they were raped. It would be a part of the audit, okay? And this is an actual bill. I don't understand. Well, at least in this case, they're not trying to redefine rape again. They're just trying to say that the federal government, which they essentially want to have little to no power, the federal government should have tons and tons of power over you and your body. Let me state again. HR 7 is unnecessary. Okay? The Hyde Amendment currently forbids low-income women from using their Medicaid coverage to help pay for abortion services. And it's really that simple. So, there was a case recently of a man who was in Missouri, I believe it was. He was killed by lethal injection, but the drug that they wanted to use, pentobarbital, here, this comes to us from Raw Story. Missouri State Representative Rick Bratton is proposing legislation that would allow death row inmates to choose firing squad as their means of execution. I don't particularly care for execution, but obviously this has nothing to do with me. Missouri has executed 2 inmates in recent months using pentobarbital, but the drug comes from a compounding pharmacy in Oklahoma that isn't licensed to do business in Missouri. Also, because the injectable form of pentobarbital is licensed to Lundbeck, the manufacturing of it by a compounding pharmacy violates the FDA regulations against producing copycat versions of FDA-approved drugs. The man that was killed recently took a long time to die, and apparently it was very, very painful. Okay, so one solution is to return to firing squads, which are a constitutionally approved means of execution. They are also, as an advocate of a similar bill in Wyoming, notes that it would be, quote unquote, one of the cheapest. Wyoming State Senator Bruce Burns told the Associated Press that he chose firing squad as opposed to any other form of execution because it's one of the cheapest for the state. The Missouri bill would authorize the director of the Department of Corrections to, quote, provide a suitable and efficient room or place enclosed from public view within the walls of the correctional facility of the Department of Corrections. It would also empower him to select a 5-person firing squad consisting of licensed peace officers. Ladies and gentlemen, people are starving in America. We are the richest nation in the world, and people are starving. Okay, emergency unemployment was recently cut off, and the Republicans have refused to pass any kind of extension because, you know, unemployed people aren't the Pentagon. It will lead to more homelessness and food insecurity. Food benefits, and this has been true for a while, the SNAP benefits are being slashed in favor of more tax cuts and military expenditures. And what is the debate that we are currently having? How to kill more people. All right, let's get into the religious stories of this week. I don't have any on my favorite person in the world right now, who is the Pope, but I do have a few others that I definitely want to bring to your attention. I'm not sure if you've heard about faith healing, which is, you know, God is your doctor, okay? Of course it doesn't work, but that doesn't matter. A Republican, this comes to us from Raw Story, a Republican lawmaker in Idaho is trying to stop a law aimed at preventing the deaths of children whose parents eschew medical treatment in favor of prayer. The Associated Press reported that State Representative Christy Perry believes that the law proposed by Democratic Representative John Gannon violates religious freedoms of families who believe God's will supersedes modern medicine. So here's the thing, kids are getting sick from preventable diseases. And instead of going to the hospital, and this is in Idaho. This is bush country, by the way. Instead of taking these children in for care, they're just praying for them. And then they're dying from preventable diseases. So a Democratic representative is introducing a bill saying that you can't kill your children anymore. And this lady, Christy Perry, doesn't like it. Quote, this is about religious beliefs. The belief that God is in charge of whether they live and God is in charge of whether they die, said Perry of the Followers of Christ, an extremist group who have let at least 4 children die of treatable illnesses in the last 3 years. Quote, this is about where they go for an eternity. Now, this group operates in Marsing, Idaho. Followers of the Christ Church. Autopsy reports of multiple children show that their deaths could have been prevented by medical intervention. Instead, their bodies now lie in a cemetery overlooking the Snake River. In June of 2012, 15-year-old Arian Jade Grandin contracted food poisoning. Her autopsy, showed 3 days of vomiting had ruptured her esophagus, causing her to hemorrhage to death. Toddler Preston Bowers died at age of 22 months of pneumonia in March of 2011. That same month, 14-year-old Rockwell Alexander Sevi died of a respiratory infection that blossomed into pneumonia, according to the Canyon County coroner Vicky Dagus Morris. The current law says treatment by prayer or spiritual means alone shall not, for that reason, be construed to have violated the duty of the care of that child, which is to say that if you pray and they die, that's okay. And that's the law that needs to be changed. The Democratic state representative told the AP that above all, medical treatment for physical harm to a child should supersede every other consideration. So this brings us to the violence on our planet. It may seem like we are living in an especially violent time, what with all of the mass shootings that have happened as late. And I have to make mention that today, January 25th, while we're taping this episode, there was a shooting earlier today in Washington, D.C. at a shopping mall. The news reports are still rolling in for this one, so we'll have more details later. But it appears at least 3 people died. And they were just shot while they were out shopping. So with things like that, it seems like the world is a more violent place. And with these gun nuts pushing for less and less regulation, and the guns in the hands of more and more people, it seems like that might only get worse. But I think eventually in America we'll wake up to the reality of that one. But honestly, overall, measured by studies and all the rest, actually, the world is becoming less violent, with one exception: religion and religious violence. A major new study published by the Pew Research Center shows that religious hostilities reached a 6-year high in 2012. Dr. Steven Pinker, Pulitzer Prize-winning author and Harvard psychology professor, writes, "Today we may be living in the most peaceful era in our species' existence." Okay. Pinker points out, wars make headlines, but there are fewer conflicts today, and wars don't kill as many people as they did in, say, the Middle Ages, for instance. Pinker notes that the reason for these advances are complex, but certainly due to the rise of education and a growing willingness to put ourselves in the shoes of others has played its part. Religiosity, however, continues to play its part in promoting in-group, out-group thinking, which casts the difference between people in terms of eternal rewards and punishments. According to the Pew Research Center, a third, 33% of the 198 countries and terrorists included in the study had high religious hostilities in 2012, up from 29% in 2011 and 20% as of mid-2007. The study demonstrates that there has been a sizable increase in the share of countries with high or very high levels of social hostilities involving religion. Pew cites several illustrations of religious minorities being attacked by the perpetrators of a majority faith. One of the common things we see that a group of countries, in that group of countries, is sectarian conflict, said Brian J. Grimm, senior research at Pew Research. The study finds rises in religious motivated threats of violence, harassment of women over religious dress, mob violence related to religion, sectarian violence, and religion-related terrorist violence. 1 in 5 countries experienced religious-motivated terrorism in 2013, which is up from 1 in every 10 countries in 2007. You can find this by C.J. Werleman over at Alternate. There's a full article. Obviously, there's more details to this, but I'll give you the gist of it right there. That violence, considering history, is down, except where religion reigns. So the Satanic Temple has issued a press release demanding that Fox Business News publicly apologize for the remarks made by one of its commentators. Okay, speaking of religious violence. On January 9, 2014, this comes to us from Raw Story, one of the participants in Fox Business News Mensa meeting, Bernard McGurk, said that members of the Satanic Temple who want to erect a monument in Oklahoma City, which we covered last week, should be executed. Quote, they should be able to put the statue up, but then they should be shot right next to it, and then we take it down, McGurk said. Yeah, this was an actual thing, an actual call for violence on Fox Business News. Okay, lawyers for the Satanic Temple say that such an incitement to violence is reckless and possibly criminal. They're afraid of people in the church their church, the Satanic Temple, actually being killed because of a call to violence on Fox News, because it is not unheard of, because it has happened before. You may remember Dr. George Tiller. Fox News' Bill O'Reilly was hammering on Dr. Tiller, calling him Tiller the baby killer, and eventually a Fox viewer went out and killed Dr. Tiller. So, given the history of Fox News viewers, the Fox News viewers have of acting upon such calls to violence, the Satanic Temple wants the network to make it clear that violence carried out against a person, even a member of the Satanic Temple, for his or her religious beliefs is unacceptable. Right? As I was mentioning before, violence is down except when religion. That's right. So a Fox Business News spokeswoman directed inquiries about the segment to WABC, where McGurk is a regular. When WABC makes a statement, of course, we'll bring it to you here. All right, so Obamacare, which is going swimmingly at the moment, and let's hope that it stays that way. I think all the weird things that they were dealing with before, most of it's gone by the wayside. I visited the site myself, and it seems to be plugging right along, and that's just fabulous. But this isn't stopping the teabaggers from raising their fists and shaking them in anger and, oh, get that dang old Obamacare, right? Okay, so conservative activist Jesse Graston on Tuesday, January 14, told a crowd outside the South Carolina State House that the ACA should be nullified and replaced by charity from churches. That's always their answer. Maybe some faith healing? Quote, "This is not just about a rally," Graston told the South Carolina coordinator of the John Burt Society. "Well, this is a recruitment meeting, and I'm calling on all of you to answer the call that the tyranny of our day has come. What will you say to your children 20 years from now when they look at you and they ask, 'Where were you, Mom and Dad, when America fell?'" Unquote. Republican lawmakers in South Carolina are pushing legislation that seeks to block the implementation of Obamacare in that state. The South Carolina Freedom of Healthcare Protection Act has passed in the state's House of Representatives last year. Graston says South Carolina was leading the resistance against the abomination of the Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act. We can't have people getting healthy. Sorry, I just lose my mind at these nitwits and morons. They think, this is a quote from him, "They think it's the duty of others to help them take care of the poor," he remarked. "We believe that we shouldn't take from others to help take care of the poor or to help yourself. But we follow Christ's example." Because I remember when Christ said that. Christ said, "Don't help other people." Okay? Only rich people. Anyway, we'll see what happens with that bill. I want to do this, bring you some good news, good and bad. Follow me. A church in Indiana has seen about 80% of its members leave after a gay choral director was forced out over his sexual orientation. Adam Fraley told the Herald Bulletin that he worked for the United Methodist Church in Alexandria for 6 years, and he also attended it with his partner. When a new minister took over the church last year, Fraley said that he resigned because of pressure about his sexual orientation. United Methodist Church law allows LGBT people to attend the church services, but says self-avowed practicing homosexuals are not allowed to be certified as candidates, ordained as ministers, or appointed to serve. The disagreement over whether Fraley should have been able to keep his job has caused a divide in the church, with people siding with the pastor or the choral director who was outed. Okay, David Steele. David Steele said that he pushed the new interim minister, David Manter, to rehire Fraley, but Manter was uncomfortable with Fraley's sexual orientation, and instead Steele was asked to resign his position in the church leadership. When Steele refused, the district superintendent personally held a meeting to relieve him of his duty. According to Steele and his wife, about 80% of the church's congregation had stopped attending because of the way that Fraley was treated. All right, we have just about hit an hour here, and so I want to go ahead and just move right on to my final thought. I think we've done enough religious stories for now. What's going on with the Congress and all the rest? I wanted to. This is my final thought for this. I haven't done one of these in a couple of weeks. I really wanted to do one today because I've been thinking about this one a lot as of late. Set up to fail. Now, obviously, we just got into the new year, And with the new year, as people do every year, they make resolutions, lose weight, eat better, all the rest. All those things are made, right? The one that strikes me the most is the lose weight one, which essentially becomes an exercise resolution. Because, first of all, I'm a runner, and I run all year. But I started when the weather was warm, and then, of course, I keep it up in the wintertime, because I don't want to lose everything that I've worked for. But the new year starts in winter. And, just before the new year, there's all the stores with the big sales, and they want you to buy a treadmill and all the rest of these big, machines. They want, and to get a good exercise machine, you can't buy one of the ones that cost a couple $100s. You got to spend money on the ones that cost, couple $1,000s. And then, of course, the gyms are all pushing memberships. Gyms want you to come out and they want you to, and all the rest. Here's the thing. Going from not exercising at all to all of a sudden exercising. First of all, the gyms are a problem. I like what I do because all I do is open my front door and go. Shoes, shorts, a shirt, gloves, hat. That's it. The things I wear all the time. That's my exercise equipment, okay? And I go out that front door. You don't have to run. You can walk too. Do a brisk walk, whatever. But the gyms, if you go from not working out at all to all of a sudden working out, the gyms, well, think about it. You're spending time getting ready. You got to drive there, and then you'll do your workout, and you'll come home, you'll suit down and decompress and all the rest. And how much time has that taken? I mean, with our busy lives, do we really have that kind of time right now? But all of the gyms want you in there. Why? Because they want you to sign up for that membership, and they want to ding your credit card every month. They don't really care whether or not you stay. And then there's the other thing. Starting a regimen when it's cold is crazy and really hard to do. When I decided that I had had enough, I decided to start in the spring. Okay? So here's the thing. Resolutions. If you want to make a major change in your life, make it when you're ready. Don't make it when everyone else makes it, or because the calendar says it's a new year and you better make it. Make it when you're ready. Make it on your terms, and you're much more likely to stick with it. For me, the turning point was I just had enough. I didn't like the way I felt. And so I went out and changed it. Like I said, I waited till the weather got warm, though. And I think everybody should do that. But you can't follow herds. You can't do what everyone else does. You can't be pressured by big box stores and gyms and all the rest, and then all this. No, you can't. Your terms. When you're ready and at your pace, whatever it is. Cutting back or quitting drinking, cutting back or quitting smoking, taking up exercise, eating better, on your terms. You can't make a massive change, especially when seasonal affective disorder is kind of hitting a lot of people right now because of how nasty the weather is outside. So, hey, that's my word. Your terms, your change when you want to. Bam! All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I got to get on out of here, but as usual, I've been very much enjoyed spending my time with you, getting these news stories out to you, and I've already begun work on next week's show, which will be another barn burner. And I want to thank you for joining me on this episode of The Fire You Can't Put Out. Put out by myself, Melvin, and my producer, Kevin. And thank you for your continued support and all the rest. Of course, we get to stay on Open Sky, and we're also going to be over at Open Sky Archive, and it sounds like we're going to be on Kiwi as well. So the show is growing, and it's going to be going more places. So I want to thank all the guys at Open Sky Radio and Archive and Kiwi and all the rest. Thank you for putting me out there, and thank you for listening. We are The Fire You Can't Put Out, and we will prevail from austerity to prosperity. All right. We got work to do. Let's go. Get on. See ya.